because they've always known Timber to be, living in the condo downtown with the sports car, with the Italian designer furniture, and following the recipe to happiness that we all think would lead us there. My taking a step outside of the rat race, so to speak, as my friend Laura said, she was shocked, but she wasn't surprised. In the sense that she saw it happen. I think it would have been more courageous, actually, to stay at the law firm and work for attorneys for 20 more years than it was to move into the unknown.
Welcome to the first ever Mindful Monday and the first ever episode of Everyday Alex. This is my new daily vlog and podcast where we're going to have a whole range of content. We're going to have excerpts from interviews and workshops on conscious life. We're going to have excerpts from Optimal Health Clinic and the Fatigue Super Conference, the various programs we've created there. Going to have films of me working with real life patients. So you really get to get some of the essence of what happens in one-on-one sessions. Going to have some guidance, inspiration sessions for practitioners. Our primary audience is going to be people that have an interest in self-development, healing, health, and well-being. We're also going to have some of my favorite book recommendations, some of my favorite workshops I'm going to talk about. We're also going to hear from people about moments of transformation, moments where their life has transformed and what helped and supported that. In this first episode for Mindful Mondays, where we're going to have highlights from Conscious Life, we have an excerpt from the first ever interview that I recorded for Conscious Life. This was with Timber Hawkeye. Timber is the author of the international best-selling book Buddhist Boot Camp and the follow-up Faithfully Religionless. Timber offers a non-sectarian approach to being at peace with both the world within and the world around us. His intention is to awaken, enlighten, enrich, and inspire. I first met Timber about 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, which was just before we filmed this series of interviews. And what was fascinating at that time was Timber had spent a period of time as a Buddhist monk, and he talks about that in this excerpt you're about to hear. And he'd started sending emails to some of his close friends, sharing his experiences of what had been happening. He was then encouraged to start posting those on Facebook, and the whole thing went crazy. These posts went crazily viral to the point that when we filmed this interview and he was staying with my wife and I at our house, he was getting 1,000 new followers a day on Facebook just through pure viral kind of interest in what he was doing. So Timber has an amazing story of both his personal journey to find insight and answers, but also the way that that's catapulted him into this platform of being a teacher. So this interview explores his journey to writing the book Buddhist Boot Camp and a little bit of his own background and what happened for him. So I hope you enjoy, and you're now going to see Timber Hawkeye and Buddhist Boot Camp. Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to the show. And my guest in the studio today is Timber Hawkeye, author of Buddhist Boot Camp. And in today's interview, we're going to be talking about Timber's story and the journey to Buddhist Boot Camp. So welcome, Timber. So how did this all come about for you?
I was working in the corporate world as a paralegal at a law firm, and one day one of the other paralegals was celebrating her 20-year anniversary at the firm. And the fact that she was celebrating 20 years in a cubicle terrified me. I got a glimpse of what my life was going to look like if I didn't make any changes.
Yeah.
So I decided to sell everything I own and move to Hawaii to lead a very simple and uncomplicated life.
Wow. That's a very dramatic response, though, to something like that. You know, there's a lot of ways you could have responded. Was there something that had birthed in you before of an interest in a change in your life, or was it something that just in that moment you were like, I have to do something different?
When I moved from San Francisco to Seattle 5 years prior to that, I had taken a 50% pay cut. And that moment, when I realized how happy I am, has nothing to do with how much money I was making. kick-started the whole thinking process as to what am I going to do one day when I'm debt-free and I can just work less and live more. Hawaii seemed like an obvious choice because I love being outdoors and it's warm year-round. So I moved there, and my friends asked that I keep in touch with them. And that's what started the process. Is I would write them emails every month to let them know what my life was like. And the benefit of working less is that I could study more. And what I enjoy studying is people's belief systems and psychology simultaneously, so I can understand not so much what people believe, but why they believe what they do.
Yes.
And so the emails to my friends became deeper in meaning every month. And at what point my friends asked that I make it public. And essentially the book is a collection of about 7 or 8 years of emails that I had sent out to my friends.
And what was the reaction in your friends when you make this huge change in your life? I mean, it's not just that you left the corporate world to go traveling. You went to live in a monastery. It's a huge change, a very courageous thing to do. Were they cynical, skeptical, jealous? What was their response?
Initially, I didn't move into a monastery. I just moved to Hawaii, and but they knew my intention was to simplify. But yes, because they've always known Timber to be living in the condo downtown with the sports car, with the Italian designer furniture, and following the recipe to happiness that we all think would lead us there. My taking a step outside of the rat race, so to speak, as my friend Laura said, she was shocked, but she wasn't surprised. In the sense that she saw it happen. I think it would have been more courageous, actually, to stay at the law firm and work for attorneys for 20 more years than it was to move into the unknown.
Yeah, I think often when someone makes a big life change like that, it's like for the people around them, there's something which somewhat wishes they could do the same thing.
Yeah.
But also it's I hear what you're saying. It in some ways, for you, it would have been more difficult to stay.
Yeah.
But also leaping into that unknown, it takes a lot of courage to do that.
And some friends were jealous. I mean, my boss, the attorney I was working with, when I went into his office to tell him, after working with him for 5 years, he knew. He just looked at me and he said, "You're moving, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And his only response was, I wish I could as well.
Yeah.
So he was very, very supportive of my transition.
Yes. And when you arrived at the monastery, so you went to Hawaii for a while, and then you decided to move into the monastery.
So after a while of living in Hawaii, I decided to simplify my life even more, and moving to a monastery was, I think, an inevitable step at one point. And that took simplifying it to a whole new level. But again, the idea is to at least temporarily eliminate the external stimuli and look within. And what I realized is that our purpose here is to learn to be completely selfless. And after being at the monastery for a while, the same friends I used to contact via email weren't getting those emails anymore because the monastery was off the grid with no electricity or cellular connection or anything, part of what made it so wonderful. And when they would handwrite me letters saying, we would love for you to come back out, I realized that on this journey to selflessness, my staying at the monastery would have actually been the most selfish thing I could do.
Oh, that's very interesting. I want to come back to that in a moment, but I'm really interested, when you first arrived at the monastery, it's like, I'm wondering, was there a moment where you realized what you'd done, that suddenly you're in robes, you're off the grid, and was it initially, I guess there was an excitement, or was there a moment where it was like, wow, my life is it's completely different? What was that transition? What was that process like?
It was a good fit. It felt like home almost immediately. I had been in robes prior to moving to the monastery, so putting on the robes was really just a reminder of the vows that I had taken. When you take the monastic vows in a way, it's similar to getting married, and you put on a wedding ring, and it's like, okay, this is my life now. And I knew even then that the robes were only to be worn until the day when they would no longer be necessary.
Yes.
If that makes any sense.
Yes. Yeah. As you were in that chapter of your life where you were in robes, you were in the monastery, can you say something about the effect that had on your own practice to really go,
much deeper within without all of those distractions. What happened for you in your own process?
Interestingly enough, moving into a monastery, which you would think would be very rigid and very hardcore, my own practice has actually been very rigid, and I haven't been very gentle with myself at all. The pendulum just swung from one extreme to the other. And when I was first introduced to meditation, it was something that I had to do every single day without a break, without any forgiveness for any slack or anything of the sort. And it was at the monastery actually where they give you a day off, where you don't have to go and sit with the rest. And it was initially absurd to me. And the practice leader asked me, what do you think would happen if you miss a day? And it was an invitation to look at how attached I was to non-attachment, so to speak. And letting go had been the first of many letting goes that's been really liberating.
Yes. Because I'm aware from reading your book, you've had somewhat of a life of extremes in a sense. And it's interesting that it's like you'd had the extreme of the external world, then you'd swung to this extreme of monastic life.
Yes.
And yet within that environment, you'd actually found a place of, or begun to found a place of balance.
Yeah, I think it's by experiencing those extremes that you then know where the center is.
Yes.
And I don't think we need to go to those extremes. It was just, I was so prone to the very militant and black and white rigid industry which I worked in for so long. And so I experimented the boundaries, and then I would have a reference point of what the middle is. And now I can sense whenever I veer too far to one side or the other.
Yes. And so you said a little bit earlier that when you decided to leave the monastery, it was that you recognized that although in a sense it was, you felt very at home there and it was a place that felt, very supportive for you, there was a recognition that somehow you weren't supporting the wider world, you weren't contributing to society. Say more about that.
I realized that I was of no use to the outside world if I kept myself tucked away at a monastery somewhere. Yes, I enjoyed it, but even with just my close group of friends who would write to me and say, we realize that you're still... they're still in the corporate world, in the cubicle, working their lives away, and that they're not yet in a position to, in a sense, give it all up or quit their job and simplify their lives. The fact that I was one of them at one point and left, it gave them hope that the fluorescent lit cubicle is not the end-all be-all, that there is life after it, and it can be whatever we want it to be. We're not defined by those experiences. It's just a step on our journey.
Yes. And of course the fact that you had lived the life that they'd lived, and you'd had this chapter of your life that you'd lived in the monastic life in a monastery, of course that makes you much more accessible to people. And people can relate to your teaching perhaps in a way that they might not someone that's only lived a monastic life.
Yeah, and it's definitely not my teaching. There's nothing, I'm just sharing my life with them, and even not being in robes makes me more accessible. I realized that staying in robes was not in line with my values, because what it had essentially done is it separated me from others. It created a sense of, oh, he's there and we're here, or it was counterproductive to celebrate the unity of us by segregating and separate. So
I hope you enjoyed that interview. You can watch the full interview by registering for a free 14-day trial at consciouslife.com. You'll also find over 500 hours of similar content of interviews and workshops on Conscious Life. Tomorrow in the vlog, we'll have the first of our filmed sessions where I'm working with Lucy to help her find the balance between supporting progress on the healing path from ME chronic fatigue without doing too much too quickly. If you're on a healing journey from ME chronic fatigue, this is going to be super valuable. But even if you're not, and you're looking to find balance in your life, like how to balance challenging yourself to progress and move forwards with also having nourishment and holding where you are, I think it's going to be a really useful session. So I look forward to talking with you tomorrow.
You've tried yoga, perhaps even meditation, and you felt calmer and more aligned. But what next? In the hustle of today's fast-paced flow, how do you live a more conscious life? Our mission is to give you the tools and support you need to live a happier, deeper, and more conscious life. We have over 200 courses and more than 150 of the world's leading teachers available to you right now. It's like going on a retreat from the comfort of your own home, whenever you want, whenever you need it. With our 14-day free trial, you can get started now and discover what's possible for your inner life.